Hello, Facebook. I feel inspired to come on because I want to talk about the separation and changing relationships and friendships. Letting go of relationships and friendships is actually okay. So I want to give permission that things can change. And I guess I want to share tools. And, big thing that I want to do is share tools that help you navigate the shifting sands when relationships change. I've moved around loads within the UK. I left where I grew up in Switzerland. So I left a lot of relationships and a lot of what I considered normal growing up into a whole new world. And then, well, basically, I don't think my story is all that different from many, but I know some people maybe grew up in one place and stay there a long time. Um, and I haven't had that experience in that I've moved quite a lot for different reasons. Um, so I've had a lot of very close friendships and that they have gone with the wind, or I've had very close relationships that have weathered the storm, and that's a beautiful thing. The kind of friendships I have are the kind that, it doesn't matter how long it's been since you last spoke. It doesn't go, it doesn't change, it doesn't go away. But there have been moments where there's been major heartbreak. So partnerships, big ruptures and endings that were painful and uncomfortable in love relationships, but also friendships where there's been like a sense of deep betrayal, painful friendship separations. And sometimes they're even more painful than the relationship you were in if that ended. And I do think it's a natural part of life that things change, people move on, or that we want to separate from particular people for whatever reason, or that people leave us and we feel the betrayal or the hurt from that. So it's a big, uncomfortable topic. And my speciality is looking at it from an energetic and consciousness perspective and alchemizing the painful stuff into whether it's more life force or peace and love in our hearts, or kind of like a liberation from pain. So that's how I would look at it. And well, I found lots of things out around our core wounds. So a lot of you might have heard of core wounds, but for example, betrayal is a core wound. These are like archetypal, across the board, pretty much all humans will experience betrayal, rejection, abandonment, I think injustice, all these like big core human experiences. But I think so if we all experience them, it's not so much about how bad it is. I think the key is like, how do we deal with it? And I think that it's all about building up a kind of toolbox of how you're going to deal with this. And that's pretty much everything that I do, is creating kind of tool after tool after tool after many experiences. I'd hate to think I'm an expert in heartbreak. It's like pretty depressing, but I love deeply, care deeply. I'm intense, and the people I attract are intense. So it's been intense in many ways. And I'm also, I know, when it's not working, it's time to cut. I mean, I am one of those actually that probably stay in relationships longer than I need to because I want it to work and I'm willing to put the work in. But also, once it's done, and you move on. And yeah, so it's how do you let go and move on? And I think what I've described it as, this is a really weird way of describing it, but when there's like intense heartbreak, you end up kind of like lying there like, what the hell's happened? And you're kind of jittery and uncomfortable and everything's churning, and there's almost like shame or guilt and discomfort, and your nervous system might be activated, and you're kind of lying awake at night endlessly or anxious. And I think that in a way what's happening is when there wasn't really like clean, how would you say it? Like, I know this is like the conclusion. So instead of two people that are really, in their own bubbles and really strong in their core sense of self and interact with each other, and then at one point they go, okay, I think we should move on, and etc. And then you can kind of move on and you're still intact and strong and in your own energy. But if you haven't got a strong sense of self, so you are looking often outside of yourself to feel strong, or like you have an identity, like wanting to belong. So putting that into a building or a town or a group, a tribe of people, and you putting yourself like, oh, when I'm in that, or when I'm there, or in this place, I am whole and I am me. So then if that falls apart, then you're like, oh, like your home and belonging and who you are isn't in your body, it's in those tribes and communities and places. So it's coming back again to the, how can we build this core sense of self? I mean, it's not only about belonging and home and tribe, it's also looking for validation outside of yourself, or looking for a partner that's like a savior, or that you only matter when you're in that particular friendship group. So all of these things are like, if that is your source of validation and love in yourself, I mean, they're all very important, obviously, but if that is all that sources your sense of wellness in yourself, then when any of that falls apart or doesn't work out or changes, then you just feel absolutely destroyed, and like you just don't exist anymore, like you're in the void of blackness and pain, and that's horrible. It's a horrible feeling to be so distraught when life moves on or changes. And I think that it's not about not feeling deeply, and grief is so important. When we lose someone we love, when a relationship ends, when the dream ends, please feel the grief, but don't let it obliterate your sense of self. I think that's what I think I'm getting at. I love to come on here and think out loud, if you hadn't noticed. There isn't a major plan, but there is an energy I'm trying to convey, or it's like a shift in the way of being to make big life events and changes in relationships and life, actually to be able to glide through them with a bit more ease rather than pure anguish. And I think a big part of that is that we have to come back to this core sense of self, which I see as almost like it's like a core pillar that goes right through the center of you, and it's almost made of like webbing and scaffolding, and that you can make stronger and reinforce every time you build a bit more resiliency and a bit more self-love. It gets stronger and stronger, this core sense of self. At the beginning, it might be very wonky, very wobbly, and very jelly-like. And I think two people that are together, this is what I was going to say, when two people are together and they're holding each other up, I'll put some scaffolding in you if you put some scaffolding in me. That means that when one goes, the other falls over, and the other one probably falls over too, actually, and then, maybe falls into addictions and depression and all sorts of stuff before moving on properly. So every time you go into the underworld, before I say that, when two people separate and they're not in their own power, so that's two people in their own power, when people have been like this instead of separately in their own power together, I think when you separate what's in between, and why heartbreak or breakups of any kind get messy and nasty, is because you're in this, what's left between you two is like rice pudding with glass in it. That is the image I got when I was trying to, because I see a lot in the other eyes, and I can see the pattern, and it's like two people not strong, without a core sense of self, are making a very messy, mixed up, soupy, confused energy field between them. And it's sharp and painful, because where someone's hurting, it's like they throw more glass at the other person, like, you did this to me. And actually, no, probably not. I mean, yes, there's abusive relationships, there's discomfort, there's mismatching, there's miscommunication, But I do believe that we can have pleasant breakups. And I do believe that we can be honorable and noble in the way that we break up with each other. It's not an opportunity to list like a million faults of the other. Like, they have to learn that for themselves at the end of the day. You know, and it's not about denying that you had a part to play in the mess. But I do believe that tearing each other down, if it's a friendship or, you know, like a relationship, is not the way forward, to be honest. I don't have all the answers, but I do think that if you have a strong core sense of self, so your inner scaffolding is strong, it's resilient, it's built, it knows how, like, it's responsive rather than reactive. It's strong with or without the tribe, the village, without the friendship group or whatever, you know. So I feel like I fared quite well during a lockdown and a breakup, which was, you know, it's horrible, and I really wish it was different. But it's happened. And I'm absolutely gobsmacked at how well I pulled myself together. And yes, I have moments of processing it and grief. And there was like quite a lot of sleepless nights because I was a bit like in shock because it was all it happened fast. But I just needed to let my body, allow my body time to respond and time to, okay, you know, take stock in a way. So I let time do its thing in one way. But I also, I ended up teaching the heart retrieval course whilst it was all happening. This was totally by accident, some kind of cosmic joke of some kind. But it helped so much because all that stuff that I was trying to share with the participants was what I've spent the last decade using to overcome loss, heartbreak, separation, but mostly to build the core sense of self. I mean, we're in it's like a cruel world somehow. Our education is all a bit messed up, certainly for magical people. We look for love in all the wrong places. We look for validation outside of ourselves. We're competing against each other. We're not really taught about love, sex, and emotion. You know, it's all a brave new world out there. And I think that there is tremendous amount of heartbreak, not only at like what's going on in the world, you know, and like other people suffering. It's like we're aware of all so much out there, way beyond our own suffering. And it's like, how can you deal with that and carry on and be a bright, resilient, loving person anyway? That is courage. And the 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 tools I'm sharing in this heart retrieval course isn't way more than just the heart retrieval. It's like everything it's like all these major tools that have caused huge shifts in my ability to be strong and resilient and loving. I think, you know, big step. How do you do forgiveness and what does it even mean energetically, you know? Like, just as a small tidbit, forgiveness has got nothing to do with the other person. It's not about going and asking for forgiveness. I mean, that you can do that, obviously, but there's so much more to forgive. Maybe I'll do another video about forgiveness. But yeah, it's way more about you and about your heart and about seeing the beauty and light in others, even though they are naive, ignorant, in pain themselves. I'm not saying excuse abusers at all. You know, being able to still be in love with yourself and strong after abuse. I've had abusive relationships, which is, you know, I wouldn't wish it on anyone. But how do you overcome that? And there are ways and tools, you know, learning to listen to your body, learning to regulate your nervous system, learning forgiveness, not for them. It's got nothing to do with forgiving your abusers. It's just not letting them abuse you beyond the time you were with them, you know, like in your own system again and again. It's how can you work with your body to release the abusive stuff so that you're not abusing, you know, the abuse isn't carrying on past the time you're with these people. So these are all like key tools to moving through life with as much, I don't know, grace and love as possible for yourself. You know, it's not about making it easier for them. It's about how can you keep living and benefiting from this awesome life you've chosen on planet Earth. You know, me, I've had to learn compassion for others and for myself, and I've had to learn self-worth. I'm going to share photos in the next few days probably about how I used to look 10 years ago. And you can see that I am absolutely fragmented, depressed, lost, addictions, abusive relationship. I mean, you can tell. I mean, I don't even recognize that person. I'm kind of shocked myself when I see them. But if you look at me now and then, it's like, whoa, you know, and that's me. I've dragged myself out of the gutter and dragged myself out of being the rice pudding with glass again and again, you know, just like so, I'm only thinking of a French word, but frayed, like that core sense of self, completely frayed, no boundaries, no protection, nothing to contain my brightness at all. And then I've had help along the way, but I've done a tremendous amount on my own. And the aura transformation really helped too for the boundary side. But I think the key and what I'm going to, you know, part of what I'm sharing in the heart retrieval course is how to alchemize the core wounding. You don't have to wear core wounding the rest of your life like a badge and a boulder on your back, you know, like, oh, my story of being abused or terrorized or whatever is, I'm just going to wear that forever. I was so heartbroken and I'm going to walk around in heartbreak forever. No, the body is dynamic. It changes and shifts all the time. And it's like, we need to, I think a big part of what I want to share is learning how to transmute and alchemize that pain into a different story, into a new lease of life. Yeah. So yeah, it's a real, when you have a strong sense of self, and let's say in an ideal world, you meet someone with a strong sense of self, two people in their own power, sourcing validation from themselves, resilient, caring and loving and compassionate. Their force field is very clear and strong and boundaried in a positive way. Yes, there's a, you know, there's a merging and sharing of consciousness and sexual energy. There's a shared energy that builds between, but it's not turning into rice pudding and messing up and you did this and that, you know. It's like staying strong and resilient in that way. The energy field that comes from that is very structured and boundaried, and your life force keeps building up for yourself. You know, you can share a lot of goodness together. So that's like the dream, is to get to that place. But I have it with my friendships for sure. And yeah, I think that's kind of where I wanted to go, is just really get to this point of, you know, there are ways of moving through these big life changes, heartbreak, grief, separation, with more grace and coming out stronger, with even more love in your heart. And that's, yeah, that's what I wanted to share today. So yeah, thank you for listening, and I'm sure I will talk to you soon. Just get in touch if you'd like to hear more about anything I'm doing. Yeah, thank you.